Alright, I know there's a lot of hype stuff over on JP, but if we can peel ourselves away from JP and just walk back to NA for just a little bit, we have some really nice servant buffs coming our way. And these are actually some really strong buffs for all three of these servants. Although Ozzy's is kind of one half of another upgrade that he'll get in the future. We'll talk about that in today's video. The other two are kind of like complete and already done. You can immediately use them. Not to say that you can't just, use Ozzy's right out the gate, but he's going to get something that makes this buff even better in the future, right? They just combo this with another buff that he'll be getting to his NP later on. So we're going to talk about all that and more in today's video because you guys know that I love to keep you guys informed on the goings on both versions of the game. And if you also like being informed on everything going on FGO related, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content. Also, if you want to see me play FGO live, I do that every single weekday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But with all that being said, let's just go ahead and start diving right into this. We'll start off with Ozzy's first because I think his is the most interesting because we also get to talk about a future buff that's going to be coming. So right now, some people may be confused. They're like, this is kind of a nice buff that he's getting. His charisma is up to 20% for 3 turns, but then he's also gaining these effects over here. They give him 10 stars every single turn and increase the party's critical damage by 30% for 3 turns as long as he's on the sunlight battlefield. So you might be looking at these being like, really, for all practical purposes, this might just be just a 2% increase to his charisma, because how am I going to proc these sunlight battlefield things? Do I just have to specifically use him on sunlit battlefields? Well, yes, at least for now, but he will be getting a upgrade in the future to his NP, and this is where things start to get a little bit nutty. Not to also mention that he's going to be getting bonus damage, and he can do this, which is really ridiculous, but he's going to grant himself Sunlight Battlefield for 5 turns, basically turning this on at all times. Also, keep in mind that this is on a 5-turn cooldown, this is on 5 turns, and this is going to be reducing this by 1 turn, so functionally, this should always be up, like mostly. Like, you should always have these kind of synergizing with each other, or you'll have like 1 turn of downtime, right? If you're not able to like fire your NP at least twice during this like 5-turn interval, it just starts to make Ozzy a little bit nuts, because you can start spamming crit stars everywhere. You can start spamming attack buffs on top of his already really good attack buff over here of 40% that is guaranteed with his 3rd skill. It just starts to make him quite a bonkers servant. Like, he just becomes a really, really good single target buster servant in general, not just a rider, because he'll be very thick because of this 40% defense. He'll be hitting really, really hard because of all the raw attack, and then he'll also have some sustain because of the HP. He's helping out your other supports and himself get to their NPs, and he can spam his skills as well, which is really, really nice. As far as also like just bringing like party utility by like sealing the enemy's NP, which can also offer additional protection. And I guess if you also have other DPSs, the attack buff and the continual lowering of the enemy's defense can also be nice, because that also does in a way buff the damage of your other DPS members as well. So again, that's why I kind of call this one half of Ozzy's buff, because right now it may seem, I don't know, not all that great. Like, you might be like, well, it's just on Sunlight Battlefield. How often do I get to proc that? Just wait for the second buff, because the second buff is like the other half of this. So yeah, that's for Ozzy. Sanzo over here, she just gets a very simple buff, and I actually pulled up a calc over here just to kind of show how much this actually does help her. This is functionally just giving her 20% attack, because, I mean, yeah, you can give this to your other party members. Maybe you brought a second DPS, and this is going to be able to help them out as well, but functionally, this is just giving her another offensive buff, so that whenever she fires this and this goes away after the 1st turn, her damage doesn't completely fall off. Because you'll see over here, she's got really high damage, right? Because you've got just naturally good damage from Sanzo herself, plus the 20% NP damage, plus now the 20% attack buff multiplying into each other. But keep in mind, again, this falls off after the 1st usage, and because of how Sanzo kind of functions with like really good NP gain and being able to get back to her NP relatively easy with, a triple arts deck, you're probably going to fire a second NP before this comes back on a 7-turn cooldown. So this at least offers her some other kind of buff, and as you'll see here, it doesn't quite bring her to those heights, but it does still give her a decent buff, so her damage doesn't completely fall off, because, well, if she didn't have this buff, she's kind of looking over here, which is not as great. But then you give her this little attack buff over here, and it makes things a little bit nicer, right? It makes things not quite as giga doomed for her whenever she loses her 1st skill, and it just, I don't know, it's a very nice buff. As someone who uses Sanzo quite often, I find a lot of use in her for being able to clear some of those large enemies in, say, those like 2-1-2 nodes or the 1-2-3 nodes, stuff like that, where you have just one randomly large dude. Having someone who can just burst out a lot of damage could be really good, because again, for those scenarios, really big damage. But if you want to use her in more difficult content where you want to use her for more than one turn, it's also nice because then her damage doesn't completely fall off. So very good buff for Sanzo. I do like it a lot. And finally, there's Bedevir's. This is probably going to be the most impactful for most players. I'm especially feeling this right now as I was farming the Grail live event, because there was one node that I really wanted to use Bedivere, but it just wasn't working out as well as I wanted it to be, because I thought he already had his first skill buff, because again, I also play JP, so I'm used to having Bedivere with this skill buff. And if you're wondering why it's that big of a deal, well, it goes from just like one turn of 16% NP damage to 3 turns of 20% NP damage, and he buffs the entire party's NP gain by 30% for 3 turns, which makes him really, really nice, and not just more difficult content, but it's also really nice if you need to use him in those very wonky farming setups, right? Where you can have double Castoria give 60% to the entire party, Bedivere himself gives himself, where is it? There it is, a 30% battery right there, and then you just gotta find the extra 10% to have him fire his NP and maybe take out a large enemy. But then this also offers a lot of really good utility for the party, because even though he could take out one person, he can also pass off some extra NP damage, which art setups don't traditionally give themselves unless you're using like Space Ishtar, or for some reason you've incorporated Tamamo into your setup, but that doesn't really work here because we're doing farming. So it's really, really nice to get that extra NP damage for more damage. And the NP gain can really help, because let's say it's like a 2-1-2 node, right? Your art servant's not going to loop as well, but this can definitely help them loop a little bit more back. They can definitely get a little bit extra NP, so that any batteries they might have might help them finish off the farming. So overall, these are all just very strong buffs. I'm a very big fan of these. I've been kind of waiting for these two in particular. I don't have Ozzy, so I'm not as excited, I guess, for it, but I am happy for people that do have Ozzy, because they finally have the first half of his buff, and when the second half comes, just prepare. You know, he's real nice once he gets that. Like, that's I remember when he got that second NP buff over on JP, I was like, this is one of the best rider servants in the game. Like, this guy is crazy. I mean, the only thing he's lacking now is like some other way to double buff himself, but if they toss him like a buster buff or a damage mod in the future, I think it's just completely lights out. I mean, he's already good enough as is, but you know, who knows what they're going to go ahead and do. You know, they like to kind of go back and buff a lot of these year 1 servers to try to keep them up to par. So who knows what they'll do in the future, because he's already looking real good. To just whatever he gets, he'll probably be good. Very similar to like Gilgamesh in that fashion, right? Where whatever Gilgamesh gets is probably just going to be really good, because they're just at the core of who they are, Gil and Ozzy, which I think it's ironic we're comparing the two, but they're both just very good, just fundamentally, and so when you start giving them extra things to do, they just straight up get better, right? As long as they're just remotely even decent things. So yeah, he's definitely on the step of the right path when he gets his second buff. And then these two, you know, again, I like that Sanzo's damage doesn't completely fall off, and for some of those farming setups, she'll be doing even more damage, making it even easier to clear some of those weirder setups. And then Bedivere also, you know, this was something that I needed like a day or two ago when I was farming Grail Live. But you know what? It's whatever. It's whatever. You know, I'm not salty about it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know which one you are looking forward to the most. Again, I'm probably going to get the most value out of using Bedivere. I do really like using the skill on JP, so that's the one I'll probably be the most excited for. But again, just generally happy with the quality of all 3 of these buffs, and I'm glad that we finally got them. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.